Welcome to the National Shared Services Conclave, Pramod. It's wonderful to meet you and take your insights today.
Thank you, Ravi. It's a pleasure to be here. I think this is a wonderful conclave because the topic is so pertinent and relevant today. I'm sorry I'm not here to be with all of you. I wish I could have spent more time because I'm sure the conclave will be extremely interesting. But at least I hope I've got a chance to give you some of our insights that we've collected over the years and be able to provide some level of best practices that we have learned.
Excellent, I think. The context today, Pramod, is you have been through the global and local experiences of shared services, business process management, and whatnot.
Yes.
And in today's context for India, shared services is becoming an emerging concept of a strategic initiative for Indian organizations.
Yes.
Whether they are private sector,
Absolutely.
whether public sector, and we also find some of the government corporations using them, maybe by different terms and terminologies.
Of course.
So really we wanted to first, given your global and local experience, share some of your insights. That will be a great value for us.
Sure. I'll be happy to. Shared services is an old concept globally and has been around for many, many years. The fact is that companies of the size of a GE or many other companies around the world, the General Motors of the world, all have learned many years ago that given the scale of their operations and their global nature, that they needed one organization to provide the back-end services to many of their subsidiaries, both domestically in the US or wherever they were home-based, as well as internationally. Consequently, they have built shared services up to a fairly sophisticated range. Now, what do we mean by shared services? I think it's important we define what it is. Frankly, it could mean something very simple, from shared back office finance and accounting activities to very large shared services organizations. I certainly know of an aircraft manufacturer that has a huge shared services back office operation, which includes management of all real estate, management of entire payroll, management of all facilities and logistics, management of infrastructure, management of technology, management of finance and accounting. So the range to which you can go is enormous.
Yes.
It varies inevitably by the size of organizations as well as their appetite for centralizing. And I'll talk a little bit about why I believe that the centralization process is a must for Indian corporates today as they seek to become more global and to grow their current presence and their footprints today. But as you think about shared services, what we have seen over the years is what I call the development of centers of excellence, of expertise.
Very right.
Because expertise, if you're managing, I'll give you very simple examples. Managing real estate in new countries by people you send out there who are supposed to be running a business is always a task fraught with risk, right? And inevitably, you need people who are real experts in these areas. Similarly, even though finance and accounting or purchasing, for instance, or supply chain seems a fairly elementary and simple concept, it isn't. It requires great expertise, it requires great knowledge and skills around controllership and taxes and regulatory compliance. It requires a level of analysis and productivity that can really benefit companies enormously, because if they don't know how they are spending their money or where they are spending their money, this can become a very debilitating concept for them because it really holds them back. Absolutely. As they seek to drive increasing competitiveness. So we think about them as centers of excellence. As part of our early building blocks, when we first built Jekis in those days, the grandfather forerunner of Genpact.
Absolutely.
What we first brought on board here was, in fact, we brought on the shared services behind many of the businesses, the huge global businesses that GE used to run.
Absolutely.
So we would take finance and accounting principles from an aircraft engine to a plastics to an NBC to, of course, GE Capital, and centralize them in one organization in India. And that provided enormous benefits. In many cases, I can tell you confidently that it improved productivity of that unit by up to 50%. Why? Very simply. As shared services, you were able to coordinate activities. You're able to share best practices, because the fact is companies with many departments or many subsidiaries often are unaware of what one subsidiary is doing, and the fact that some other subsidiary is having to reinvent the same wheel, whether it be in systems or technology or accounts payable or accounts receivable. Similarly, the ability to drive productivity amongst people is important, because you can drive productivity by training people up in a shared services context to serve multiple subsidiaries or multiple units of the same company. And you can achieve dramatic improvements in productivity. One very large element, your investment in technology and infrastructure for shared services can be really optimized as long as you're centralized. You cannot do it on a decentralized basis. Yeah. And the fact is, companies end up spending oodles of money because of fiefdoms within companies which say, no, I need to own this technology, I need to own the finance and accounting, etc. So in all my life, I have heard more stories around this one than ever before, where every subsidiary of a company says, I'm in charge, and accounts payable is a core competence without which I lose my competitive edge. I always find that a remarkable excuse which people use. But the fact is, paying bills is paying bills. Yes. And you want to do it as quickly and as cheaply and as effectively as you want, without necessarily having that subsidiary also involved in looking after it. All they want is, they send you your bills, you pay them, and you send the report back to them. And the last point I would make is, it's enormously important in terms of core competence.
Yes.
Companies have leadership teams that need to focus on their business. Business is competitive enough today.
Yes.
It's with all its pressures of growth and cost competitiveness and globalization. Does a CEO or a CFO or a CEO of a company really want to spend time worrying about their back office departments? Or do they want to focus on customers or on products or on growth? This is a very essential debate that all companies must have internally. And actually there isn't two answers. There's only one answer. The more you can help senior leadership of a company focus on the markets and their customers, and that's where we are coming to now in our overall discussion around what sort of shared services makes sense for a variety of different companies.
Excellent. I think I remember, I think one of the early learnings I had on shared services when, Jack Welch used this term, how do we make the back office become the front office?
Absolutely.
And so, in the context of what you're saying, that makes a huge value. There are 2 points, one is, how does the shared services, become a strategic enabler to business? One is really improving productivity and making sure some of the efficiencies are achieved. So it'll be useful to hear your thoughts on how do they become a strategic enabler?
Yes. Well, I think it's a very important concept which is relatively new.
Yeah.
And I think there's a bunch of things that we can do around it which are very, very interesting. So one of the benefits we had as Jekis is we always ran it as a commercial organization.
Right.
We did not get a mandate from Jack saying, send your business to Jekis in India. We had to go out with a business development team and convince the businesses within GE that we were worthy of being given business, that we would perform well, and we would be competitive. And on a yearly basis, we would be subject to the usual negotiations that GE is famous for, in terms of price and productivity and expectation. So one, build shared services competitively. Let them compete for business. Let them not take it for granted. The less you can make it a cost, and the more you can make it almost as a business, the more honed they will be in terms of use of technology and use of all the elements that go with a competitive business. It will also make the people who work there far more competitive and willing to learn about new technology and new ways of doing things than anything else. Competition ultimately does that to you. 2, strategically, use it as a real center of excellence. So I'll take a few examples. In finance and accounting, use it to close your books faster, enhance controllership, make sure regulatory compliance is done really well. Make sure you get terrific financial planning and analysis out of your books, which help you understand which customers are buying more or buying less, where are you spending money, which products profitability is poor or better. You can have financial analysis. Financial analysis is a unique art. I think GE used to do this better than anybody else I certainly was aware of, because they used the data coming out of the systems in a way that allowed the business leaders to look at the data and say, I'm not selling enough products in Jodhpur, but I am in Agra. Why? Let me understand why this is happening and what sort of products am I selling where. 2, where am I spending my costs? Where am I spending money? In one case, in one part of the country, I'm spending X amount on buying computers or buying infrastructure. In another part of the country, my costs are much higher. Why? Competitively, you can use it to drive profitability, which in turn can help you drive more investments in the areas you're interested in. Product profitability, sourcing, better sourcing of products. Again, it's as we all know, sourcing is a real expertise that you need to build over time. Shared services can be a strategic advantage, most importantly because they allow an organization to be nimble and flexible. Let me try and explain what I mean by that. The fact is, once you've got a platform set up for a variety of different activities, you can put on more acquisition onto that and integrate them extremely fast in a way that perhaps you would not be able to do if you have a disaggregated back office. 2, it can allow you to do so at a far more cost-effective basis than again it would be if you were not centralized. The last one I would say is it allows you to really focus your investments in those areas that matter the most to the corporation as a whole, as opposed to individual subsidiaries all making their own individual decisions on how to invest and where to invest. And you have a real champion and a real partner. Everybody worries about you put it in a shared services and it's out of your control. Well, the best way to control that is frankly make them competitive. Make them come to you for business and make them earn their business.
Absolutely.
Drive them for productivity every year and ask them to be as competitive as a person outside, as a third party. And once you do that, you're able to drive a level of discipline as well as competitive edge to the shared services concept, which can be a true generator of advantage for companies. The advantages that we have seen in India are enormous for shared services. And I think in some respects, the advantages are even greater than they are globally.
Okay.
A couple of reasons for that. One is use of technology in India just has not been moving as at fast a pace as it has globally. And therefore the use of technology and ERP platforms for your entire back office, for payroll, for supply chain, for all of that, for the integration of all those elements, as you said, not silos, but integrating them one across the other, hasn't happened. You can leapfrog that process by the application and the use of shared services as a concept. You can leapfrog that process whether you do it yourself or you do it with an expert third-party service provider. To me, one of the key elements is understanding business processes. Many business processes in many Indian companies have grown up over the years in a fashion that they have been grown organically, and perhaps nobody has taken the time to go back, analyze them, strip them apart and see, do they still make sense in today's context?
Absolutely.
3, I would say, as you look at business processes, the other element that comes in is the whole area of analytics. Analytics, or the mining of data within a company, is still relatively at a nascent level. In fact, the whole shared services concept in India is at, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say it's at a scale of, it's at 1 or 2. And that's why this conclave is so relevant. But the analysis of data, expense data, billing data, receivables data, customer management data, customer responses, customer services, understanding how your customers feel about you, understanding which products are making money, which are not. I think analysis of that provides a rich insight. And as Indian companies think about global growth or domestic growth across many different parts of the country, new towns, new cities, new rural areas, I think all of those require good understanding and data to back it up, to help you understand where you should invest your money, where you don't. So it's a very powerful tool. And I'm delighted to see that in India, many companies are beginning to go down that path. Sorry, I would add one other point. Productivity gains can be made through consolidation in India. Because many units, business units in industrial conglomerates all have their own back offices or shared services pieces. Bringing them together, I know this is a large claim, but I think we've done it often enough. Over time, you can drive 50% productivity in these areas. And that's where the bang for the buck is, along with much higher quality. One other area which it really helps is discipline of process. Today, a lot of our processes, and I can say this from first-hand experience, a lot of our processes in companies tend to be ad hoc. You know somebody, you get it done. You talk to somebody else, you get it done. You need an approval, you walk across. Putting the processes in place, the business processes in place, which drive first discipline, but then, very importantly, speed and efficiency, is an essential element that shared services will require. You can't run shared services on a centralized platform without it. And once you bring it in, I think companies begin to realize the power this can give you in terms of allowing you to focus on the areas you need to, and allowing everything else to work smoothly and efficiently. It's a bit like, modern day cars. You don't need to know what's under the bonnet yourself, and they work beautifully and they go forever.
Yes.
And I think to some extent, you need shared services to work like that.
Excellent. I think the last point I want to touch upon is how does it become relevant for public sector in India? There are large corporations. Some of them are doing in their own way.
Yes.
So, based on your global experience, how do you see that becoming relevant for Indian organizations,
yes.
public sectors and so on?
It's an important point because, public sector in India commands such a large portion of our total economy, employs so many people, and actually has fairly significant investment in business processes and technology. So for them, if I may say, those of them who are willing to embrace this becomes even more important. It's a catalyst for re-engineering their business processes, which have been in situ for years, perhaps.
Yes.
The same processes have been continuing for a long period of time. And shared services will force the relook of these processes into saying, how can I re-engineer them and make them far more efficient? How can I make decision making much faster? How can I get the approval system to work much faster? How can I compete with the private sector where I need to? Because I need a faster turnaround time and more flexibility, etc. So I think for public sector units, this will be even more powerful. On technology, same thing. How do you leapfrog technology? And the impact they can have, for instance, on services they provide to end consumers across India can be enormous. And I think that insight you're really going to get once you centralize a lot of your departments and your organizations. I will tell you though that many banks, for instance, have embarked on this process. And I know the State Bank of India and many other banks have done a lot of homework with the help of a lot of management consultants, etc., which allow them to modernize their branches, modernize their systems and technologies. This applies across the board to all PSUs, not just to banks.
Absolutely.
And I think the impact you could have as a result of that would be enormous, because I think there's so much low-hanging fruit, if I may say, in some of those areas.
Many thanks, Pramod. I think you emphasized on productivity, centers of excellence, the competitive advantage, and above all, really making sure that there is a strong analytics support to make this happen. So really appreciate your inputs.
My pleasure, Ravi. I really am appreciative of this chance. I wish you all success with your conclave. This is a theme which is really important for India's competitiveness and for the competitiveness of our companies. And I'm delighted that we've been able to help in some small way here. Thank you.
Thank you.